The doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep, resonant hum. Ambassador Day One stepped through first, his dark suit crisp against the alien architecture of the vast room. Behind him walked Hannah, her military uniform bearing medals from conflicts most council species had never heard of. Taman followed, carrying data tablets filled with evidence that should have settled this matter months ago. The chamber was enormous, designed to humble newcomers. 47 species sat in tiered seats that rose like an amphitheater toward a domed ceiling that showed the stars beyond. Each delegation occupied their designated space, some in environment suits, others in tanks of liquid, a few simply floating as energy beings. After 15 years, Day One still found the diversity beautiful. Today, though, he noticed only the cold stares. The Velcrum Archon sat at the highest point, his reptilian form draped across a throne of polished stone. His scales were gray with age, each one carrying the weight of 3 centuries of leadership. His eyes, vertical slits of amber, tracked the humans as they walked to their place at the lowest tier. The newest members always sat closest to the floor. Day One had expected this summons. The Farin Collective had been building their case for months, spreading whispers through council halls, filing formal complaints in triplicate. The insectoid hive mind occupied their seats in perfect synchronization. Thousands of individual beings moving as one, their chittering communication. It's creating a background hum that never ceased. The Archon's voice boomed through the chamber without need for amplification. The Council recognizes the human delegation. You stand accused of illegal colonization in the Outer Reach territories. The Farin Collective has brought evidence of your violations. A Farin speaker stepped forward, its mandibles clicking. 3 centuries ago, our collective reserved 17 star systems for future expansion. Humans have settled 23 worlds within those systems. This is theft. Day One waited for the translation to complete, though he understood the Farin language perfectly. Patience was a weapon. He had learned that in his years of diplomacy. When the chamber fell silent, he activated his data tablet. The Outer Reach systems were marked as reserved, but never settled, Day One said, his voice calm and clear. Under Galactic Council law, specifically Article 47, Section 12, reservation claims expire after 200 years without settlement. The Farin reservations expired 8 or 3 years ago. He projected the legal text onto the chamber's central display. The words hung in the air, clear and undeniable. Furthermore, Day One continued, humanity filed proper settlement claims for each world. We followed every protocol. We submitted our intentions to the Council archive. We waited the required 30-month review period. No objections were filed. We settled these worlds legally. Taman stepped forward, adding his evidence to the display. Survey reports, environmental assessments, population records. Everything documented, everything proper. 40 million humans had made these worlds their homes over 15 years. Cities had risen. Children had been born. Lives had been built. The Farin speaker's chittering grew agitated. Reserved means reserved. The law is old. It should not apply to us. Murmurs rippled through the council. Some species nodded in agreement. Others remained silent. Day One noticed which ones supported the Farin and which ones avoided taking sides. Politics were always layered, always complex. Hannah shifted beside him, her hand instinctively moving toward, her hip where a weapon would have been if the council allowed such things. Day One touched her arm gently, a silent reminder to wait. The Velcrum Archon leaned forward. His ancient eyes studied the evidence on display, the legal citations, the settlement records, the timestamps proving humanity had done everything correctly. For a long moment, the chamber held its breath. Then the Archon waved one clawed hand dismissively. The evidence is noted, he said. However, the Council must consider the broader implications. The Farin Collective is a senior member with significant standing. Humanity is new, young, still learning the ways of galactic civilization. Day One felt the shift in the room like a physical pressure. This was not about law. This was about power. The Council votes on the Farin petition, the Archon announced. One by one, species cast their votes. Some voted against humanity openly. Others abstained, which meant the same thing. A few voted in humanity's favor, but not enough. Never enough. The Council finds in favor of the Farin Collective, the Archon declared. Humanity is censured for premature colonization. All settlements in the disputed territories must be evacuated within 6 standard months. Day One opened his mouth to speak, to argue, to present the additional evidence he had prepared for exactly this scenario. The Archon pressed a control on his throne. Day One's microphone went dead. His voice carried only a few meters, instead of filling the chamber. "You are young human," the Archon said, his voice dripping with something that might have been pity or might have been contempt. "The decision is final. This council has spoken for 10,000 years. We do not require lectures from species who have barely left their homeworld." The chamber erupted in clicking, buzzing, and various forms of alien laughter. The Farin speaker returned to their delegation. Mandibles spread in what Day One had learned to recognize as satisfaction. Hannah stepped forward, her voice rising. "This is not justice. This is politics. You are punishing us for being new, not for breaking any law." Several council members turned away, uninterested. Others simply stared, their alien faces unreadable. Day One placed a hand on Hannah's shoulder. She looked at him, anger burning in her eyes. He shook his head slowly. "Not here. Not now." He gathered his data tablets with careful, deliberate movements. Taman did the same, his face a careful mask of neutrality. Hannah stood rigid, her military training the only thing keeping her from saying more. Day One turned to face the council one final time. He looked at the Velcrum Archon, then at the Farin delegation. Then he turned slowly, meeting the eyes of every species that had voted against humanity, and those who had abstained, and even those few who had supported them. He said nothing. Instead, he walked toward the chamber doors. His footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet space. Hannah followed. Then Taman. The 3 humans crossed the massive floor in silence, their footfalls the only sound in a room that held. Representatives from 47 starfaring civilizations, no one spoke. No one moved. The species who had laughed moments before now watched in uncertain silence as the humans simply left. The doors closed behind them with that same deep, resonant hum. In the council chamber, the Velcrum Archon shifted uncomfortably on his throne. The Farin delegation chittered among themselves, celebrating their victory. But several older species, those who had seen empires rise and fall over millennia, felt something they could not quite name. It felt like a mistake. Outside the chamber, Day One walked down the corridor without looking back. Hannah kept pace beside him, tension in every line of her body. "What now?" she asked quietly. Day One's expression remained calm, but something cold had entered his eyes. "Now we show them what silence sounds like." Captain Jinwoo stood on the bridge of the trade vessel New Horizon, watching the cargo manifest scroll across his screen. 50,000 tons of medical supplies bound for the Velcrum colony on Theta Station. Standard run. He had made this delivery 17 times in the past 3 years. His communications officer looked up from her station. "Captain, priority message from Earth Commerce Authority." Jinwoo accepted the encrypted transmission. He read it once, then read it again to be certain he understood correctly. The message was brief, just 3 sentences. All human trade vessels were to cease operations with Galactic Council species effective immediately. All existing contracts were void. Return to human space for reassignment. "Change course," Jinwoo said quietly. "Set navigation for Earth." His first officer stared at him. "Sir, we're 2 days from Theta Station. They're expecting this medical shipment. There's an outbreak of Krellian fever in the northern settlements." Jinwoo met his officer's eyes. "I know. Change course anyway." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on hundreds of human vessels. Cargo ships changed direction mid-route. Passenger liners canceled bookings. Survey ships abandoned joint research missions. Within hours, human trade simply stopped. On the science station orbiting Proxima 7, Director Sohyun called an emergency meeting of all human researchers. 43 scientists crowded into the main conference room, confused and worried. Sohyun had worked with alien colleagues for 8 years. She had friends among the Talvexian research team. Good friends. We're leaving, she announced. All of us. All human scientific personnel are being recalled from council facilities. A younger scientist raised her hand. But, Director, we're in the middle of the quantum resonance project. We're weeks away from a breakthrough. The Talvexians need our expertise in field manipulation. Sohyun felt the weight of the decision. She had helped design this project, had spent 3 years of her life on it. I know. Pack your research. We leave tomorrow. The Talvexian team leader found her later that evening. Sohyun, is this about the council vote? The colony dispute. Sohyun continued packing her equipment, not looking up. I have my orders. But our work, the Talvexian said, his crystalline voice tinged with something that might have been desperation. We cannot complete it without you. You will have to find a way, Sohyun replied, finally meeting his eyes. I am sorry. She was sorry. But not sorry enough to stay. Admiral Byung-ho reviewed fleet positions from his command center on Mars Station. Ships were moving, quietly and without fanfare. Third Fleet was repositioning to the outer territories. Seventh Fleet had begun exercises near the human colonies in unclaimed space. Nothing aggressive. Nothing that would trigger alarms. Just careful, methodical movement. His aide brought him reports of the trade shutdown. Sir, we're receiving distress calls from several council species. Medical stations are asking where their supply ships are. The Velcrum are demanding explanations for breached contracts. Log the messages, Byung-ho said. Do not respond. Not even to the medical emergency calls. The Admiral was quiet for a moment. He had spent 20 years protecting human interests. He knew what this decision would cost. No, not even those. On Earth, Prime Minister Yoon sat across from Ambassador Daewon in a secure conference room deep beneath the government complex. Between them lay a document marked Protocol Exodus. The Council is already sending messages, Yoon said, demanding explanations, asking for negotiations. Daewon's expression was carved from stone. And our response? Nothing. Just as you recommended. Yoon leaned back in her chair. How long do you think before they understand? They already understand, Daewon replied. They simply do not believe it yet. They think we will return, apologetic and compliant. They think this is a tantrum, and when they realize it is not, Daewon smiled, though there was no warmth in it. Then the real education begins. Well, 3 weeks passed. Then a month. The messages from the council grew more frequent, more urgent. Ambassador Daewon read each one. He never responded. The Furen Collective, emboldened by their victory, moved swiftly to claim the disputed colony worlds. Their ships arrived at New Harmony, the largest human settlement, expecting resistance. They found empty cities instead. Every human was gone. 40 million people evacuated in less than 6 months, just as the council had demanded. But they had left the infrastructure intact. Buildings stood ready for occupation. Farms stretched to the horizon. Water purification systems hummed with power. The Furine moved in, chittering their satisfaction. This would be easier than expected. Within 3 days, problems began. The automated farms shut down. Not all at once, but in cascading failures that the Furine technicians could not stop. The systems were all connected in ways the manuals did not explain. Override codes did not work. Emergency protocols failed to engage. The water purification plants began producing water with trace chemical imbalances. Nothing immediately dangerous, but not right either. Furent engineers followed the technical documentation exactly, but the problems persisted. On the 4th day, the main power grid developed fluctuations. The Foreign brought in their best electrical engineers. Everything looked correct according to the schematics, but the fluctuations continued, growing worse each day. By the end of the 2nd week, New Harmony was barely functional. The Foreign sent urgent requests to the Council for technical support. The council sent specialists from 6 different species. None of them could solve the problems. One elderly Velcrum engineer finally understood. The humans did not sabotage anything, he reported. They simply maintained systems that were fundamentally flawed. The original designs had problems that the manuals never mentioned. The humans fixed those problems constantly, intuitively, without documenting what they were doing. Now those original flaws are surfacing. The Farine abandoned New Harmony after 3 months. The other colony worlds told similar stories. Meanwhile, medical stations across the frontier began closing. Human doctors had represented 60% of xenomedicine specialists in council space. They were the only ones who could treat certain cross-species infections, who understood the complex interactions between different biological systems. The medical schools could train replacements eventually, but that would take years. In the meantime, people suffered. The Velcrum shipyards operated at reduced capacity. Human metallurgical expertise had solved problems with hull stress that Velcrum engineers had struggled with for decades. Without humans, those problems returned. Communication networks began experiencing outages. The quantum relay stations that connected the galaxy required constant adjustment and maintenance. Human technicians had been the best at this work, able to sense problems before instruments detected them. Now the relays failed with increasing frequency. Food shortages appeared in 17 council systems. Human agricultural worlds had been producing 40% of the protein supplements that 3 species required for basic nutrition. Those shipments had stopped completely. 3 months after the humans walked out, the Galactic Council finally acknowledged they had a crisis. The Velcrum Archon convened an emergency session. "We must resolve this situation," he announced to the assembled species. "The human withdrawal is causing unacceptable disruption." The Firen speaker clicked its mandibles nervously. Several client species who depended on Firen trade had already expressed anger about the food shortages. The collective's carefully built influence network was beginning to fracture. "Send a formal communication to Earth," the Archon ordered. "We are willing to revisit the colony decision. Tell them we can negotiate new terms." The message was crafted carefully by the Council's best diplomats. It acknowledged that perhaps the decision had been hasty. It suggested that reasonable species could find compromise. It was not quite an apology, but it left room for humans to return with dignity. The message was sent on every channel in every human language, transmitted to Earth and every human colony. 2 days later, a response arrived. Single line of text. No preamble, no diplomatic flourish. Human delegation has no further business with the Galactic Council. That was all, in the council chamber. The Archon read the message 3 times. Around him, species began to whisper among themselves, some with fear, some with anger, but all of them with a growing realization the humans were not coming back. Engineer Minsu had maintained Quantum Relay Station 47 for 6 years. The station floated in deep space between 3 major trade routes, a critical node in the galactic communication network. Without it, messages that took minutes would take weeks. When the recall order came, Minsu spent 2 full days writing detailed handover notes for his replacement. He documented every quirk of the system, every unusual adjustment he had made, every workaround for problems that the official manuals did not mention. The Velcrum engineer who replaced him seemed competent enough. He read through all of Minsu's notes carefully, asked intelligent questions, and assured Minsu that everything would be fine. "The manuals are very complete," the Velcrum said, his scaled hands touching the control panels. "I have trained on these systems for many years." Minsu almost mentioned the harmonic imbalance in Reactor 3 that required adjustment every 16 hours. He almost explained about the cooling system's tendency to overcorrect in the 3rd cycle. He almost warned about a dozen other small things that the manuals got wrong or did not mention at all. Instead, he just nodded. "Good luck," he said, and left. 3 weeks later, Relay Station 47 began experiencing signal degradation. The Velcrum engineer followed the troubleshooting protocols exactly as written. He checked every system against the specifications. Everything measured within acceptable parameters, but the signal quality continued to decline. Within 2 months, the degradation spread to 6 other relay stations in the network. Engineers across the galaxy struggled to understand why. The equipment was functioning correctly according to all their instruments. Yet the communication network was slowly failing. What they did not understand was that human engineers never just followed the manuals. They listened to the equipment. They felt the vibrations. They noticed patterns that instruments could not measure. And when they found problems, they fixed them immediately. Without waiting for official approval or documentation, the manuals described what to do. Humans understood why things worked. Across Council space, similar failures cascaded through systems that had seemed reliable for years. Every place where humans had worked, problems emerged. Not sabotage. Just the natural result of removing people who had been quietly holding broken systems. Together, through expertise and intuition, the economic impact was devastating. Trade between Council species had always depended on reliable communication and transportation. As relay stations failed and shipping routes became less efficient, the entire economic network began to strain. The Velcrum Archon called daily emergency sessions. Reports flowed in from across Council space. Medical facilities closing. Food riots on 3 colony worlds. Communication blackouts lasting days instead of hours. Industrial production falling as supply chains collapsed. "We must contact the humans again," one council member insisted. "Offer them better terms. Full membership on the High Council, whatever they want." The Archon's pride warred with his growing fear. "They are one species. We are 47. Surely we can solve these problems ourselves." But they could not. Oh, they tried. The best minds from dozens of species worked around the clock. They made progress in some areas. The Talvexian crystalline engineers eventually figured out the quantum relay adjustments. Though it took them 4 months to understand what human technicians had done instinctively, other problems proved more stubborn. Xenomedicine was particularly challenging. Human doctors had a remarkable ability to understand biological systems across species barriers. They saw connections that specialists in single species missed. Without them, cross-species medicine regressed by decades. The economic situation grew worse each week. 3 council species formally entered recession. The Farine Collective faced internal revolt as their client species. Suffering from food shortages and communication breakdowns, questioned why they should remain loyal to a collective that could not provide basic services. The Archon finally authorized another message to Earth. This one was more direct. It acknowledged the Council had made an error. It offered humanity full restoration of their colony worlds, plus compensation for the evacuation costs. It invited them to return to the Council with expanded privileges. The message was transmitted with high priority on every remaining functional relay. The response came 2 days later. Not from Earth's government, but from Ambassador Day One personally. A recorded message played in the council chamber. Day One appeared on the main display, seated in a simple chair, his expression calm and neutral. "The Galactic Council taught humanity a valuable lesson," he said. His voice was quiet, almost conversational. "We are young, and we do not know our place. You were correct about that. We mistakenly believed our place was among you, as equals despite our youth, as partners despite our inexperience." He paused, and something that might have been sadness crossed his features. "We now know our place is elsewhere. We thank the Council for this education. We bear you no ill will. We simply have no further interest in your organization or its affairs." The recording ended. Silence filled the council chamber. The Velcrum Archon stared at the blank display where Day One's image had been. "What does that mean?" demanded the Farine speaker. "Elsewhere? Where?" The answer came 3 days later from an unexpected source. A Talvexian merchant ship, operating outside council space, brought back news of human activity in the unclaimed territories. Humans were establishing trade relationships with species that had never joined the council, species that the council had considered too primitive or too isolationist to matter. The Korath, master shipbuilders, who had rejected council membership centuries ago, were meeting with human delegations. The Tolson, brilliant mathematicians who found council politics beneath them, had opened their borders to human scientists. The Vrin, former council members who had left in disgust over corruption, were hosting human diplomatic missions. Admiral Bunjo stood in a shipyard that had not existed 6 months earlier. The Korath had built it in partnership with human engineers. Combining Korath's expertise in hull design with human innovations in power systems, "Your species learns quickly," the Korath shipmaster said, his massive form towering over Bianco, "and you do not waste time with endless committees and political maneuvering." Byung-ho smiled. "We had good teachers recently. They showed us exactly what not to do." The shipyard was already producing vessels. Not military ships, not yet, but cargo haulers with better efficiency than anything the council used. Passenger liners with more comfortable accommodations. Survey ships that could handle environments. Council vessels avoided. Director Sohan worked in a new research facility on Towson Prime, the silicon-based. Mathematicians communicated in equations that most species found incomprehensible. But Sohan and her team had learned to understand them. The council never wanted to work with us. A Tolson researcher explained through mathematical notation that appeared in holographic form. They said our methods were too abstract, too theoretical. Sohan nodded, translating the equations into concepts her team could use. They wanted practical results without understanding the underlying principles. They did not value knowledge for its own sake. "But you do," the Tolson said. "Your species seeks to understand, not just to use." The collaboration was producing breakthroughs, faster-than-light communication that did not require quantum relays. Navigation systems that could plot courses through regions of space the Council had marked as impassable. Energy sources more efficient than anything currently in use, and humans were sharing these discoveries with their new partners. Not with the Council, Captain Ginwoo commanded a new trade route that bypassed Council space entirely. His ship carried goods between human colonies and Korath settlements, with stops at Tolson research stations and Vrian commercial hubs. The trade volume was growing exponentially. Species that had been isolated or marginalized were suddenly connected in a network of mutual benefit. No species dominated. No ancient hierarchy determined who sat where or who spoke when. Prime Minister Yuna reviewed reports from across human space and beyond. New colonies were thriving in places the Council had never considered valuable. High-gravity worlds that only humans could comfortably settle. Radiation-heavy systems where human adaptability allowed survival. Asteroid belts that human mining techniques could exploit efficiently. Human population in these new territories had already exceeded the 40 million that had been evacuated from the disputed colonies, and growth was accelerating. "The Council still does not understand," Daewon said, sitting across from Yuna in the same secure conference room where they had planned Protocol Exodus. "They think this is about revenge, about making them suffer for insulting us." "It is not," Yuna asked with a slight smile. Daewon said seriously. "It is about building something better. If they suffer in the process, that is merely a consequence of their own choices." Back in Council space, the crisis deepened. 7 member species were now in formal recession. Infrastructure failures continued, despite massive investment in repairs and training. The communication network operated at 60% efficiency, despite every effort to restore it, and every week brought new reports of human activity outside Council space. New trade agreements, new colonies, new partnerships with species the Council had ignored or dismissed. The Velcrum Archon finally understood. This was not a negotiation tactic. This was not a protest that would end when the humans felt they had made their point. This was humanity leaving them behind. He authorized one final attempt at reconciliation. Not a message this time, but a formal delegation. 3 senior council members would travel to Earth to meet with human leadership directly, to apologize properly, to offer whatever terms necessary to bring humanity back into the fold. The delegation prepared to depart. Carrying offers of unprecedented power and privilege, they would arrive at Earth to find no one willing to meet with them because Humanity had moved on. Explorer Ji-hoon had spent most of his adult life searching for new worlds. His ship, the Farseeker, was designed for long-duration missions into uncharted space. Before the Council incident, he had been mapping systems for potential human expansion. Always careful to check Council records to avoid conflicts. Now he searched for something different. The Korath homeworld appeared on his sensors after 3 weeks, in deep space. Most species considered the Korath dangerous. They had destroyed 2 Council exploration vessels that had entered their space without permission decades ago. The Council had marked the entire region as forbidden. Territory.Ji-hoon sent the greeting signal that Admiral Byeon-ho had given him. An old Korath merchant had sold the proper protocols to a human trader 6 months ago. It was a gamble that the protocols would be honored. 3 Korath warships intercepted Farseeker within an hour. Each ship was twice the size of Ji-hoon's vessel, bristling with weapons that made Council military technology look primitive. Human vessel, a deep voice rumbled through the communication system. You approach Korath space. State your purpose or be destroyed. Ji-hoon kept his voice steady. I come seeking conversation between our peoples. I bring greetings from humanity and an invitation to discuss mutual interests. Silence stretched for long seconds. Ji-hoon could feel his crew's tension. Then the Korath voice spoke again. You use the old protocols? The proper forms. The Council species never bothered to learn them. They demanded we join their organization, threatened us when we refused. What makes humans different? We are not asking you to join anything, Ji-hoon replied. We simply wish to meet species who value independence and direct communication. Species who make their own choices rather than following the Council's hierarchy. Another pause. Then follow us. Any deviation from the prescribed course will result in your destruction. The Korath ships led Farseeker to their homeworld. Ji-hoon had never seen anything like it. Cities of stone and metal covered the landscape, built with a geometric precision that spoke of mathematical genius. The Korath themselves were massive beings, 3 times the height of humans. With 4 arms and skin like polished granite, the shipmaster who met Ji-hoon in the landing bay looked down at the human explorer with eyes that glowed faintly blue. You are small, the shipmaster observed. Fragile. Yes, Ji-hoon agreed. But we are here, and we are listening if you are willing to speak. That first meeting led to others. The Korath were master engineers who had spent millennia perfecting their craft in isolation. They had no interest in the Council's political games or social hierarchies. But they were interested in human adaptability and problem-solving approaches. You think differently than we do, the shipmaster explained during one long conversation. We perfect through iteration and precision. You improvise and adapt. Your methods seem chaotic to us, but they produce results we had not imagined. Within 3 months, Korath engineers were working alongside human designers. The combination proved remarkably effective. Korath structural designs with human power systems, Korath weapons integrated with human targeting algorithms, ships that neither species could have built alone. Other humans made contact with other isolated species. The Talson had rejected the Council for different reasons. They were beings of pure silicon and crystal, their thoughts flowing through quantum calculations that most organic species could not comprehend. The Council had approached them once, offering membership. The Talson had responded with a mathematical proof that the Council's governing structure was inherently unstable and would collapse within 10,000 years. The Council had not appreciated this analysis. But when human scientists approached the Talson with genuine curiosity and a willingness to learn their mathematical languages, the crystalline beings opened their borders. Director So-hyun and her team spent months learning to think in equations instead of words. The breakthroughs came quickly after that. The Talson understood the mathematics of space in ways that other species had never imagined. Faster than light travel, quantum communication, energy manipulation, all of these became clearer when viewed through Talson mathematical frameworks. Why do you share this knowledge with us? So-hyun asked one of the senior Talson researchers. The response came as a cascade of equations that resolved into a simple concept. Knowledge is not diminished by sharing. It multiplies. The council hoarded information to maintain power. We prefer partnership with those who seek understanding. The Varian had actually been council members once. They had left the organization 200 years ago. After exposing corruption in the council's resource allocation committee, the council had responded by attempting to sanction the Varian economically. The sanctions had failed. The Varian were too self-sufficient to technologically advance to be easily pressured, but the experience had left them bitter and isolated. When human diplomats arrived at Varian space with an offer of simple trade and cooperation with no political strings attached, the Varian were skeptical. Why should we trust you? The Varian chancellor asked Ambassador Hannah during their first meeting. You were council members. You participated in their system. Hannah, who had left diplomacy to day one in the past, found herself representing humanity in these new negotiations. Her military background gave her a directness that the Varian appreciated. We were council members, she agreed, and we learned the same lesson you did. The council is not interested in justice or cooperation. They are interested in maintaining their hierarchy. We left, just as you did. And now you build a new organization? The chancellor asked. A new council with a different name but the same purpose? No, Hannah said firmly. We are building partnerships, individual agreements between sovereign species. No central authority, no hierarchy. If you never want to speak with the Korath or the Talson, that is your choice. We will still trade with you based on our bilateral relationship. The Varian had extensive intelligence networks. They knew about the council's struggles. They had watched humanity's quiet withdrawal with great interest. The council is failing, the chancellor said. It was not a question. Yes, Hannah confirmed. And we did not cause that failure. We simply stopped holding their broken systems together. The Varian joined the growing network of independent species. They brought sophisticated manufacturing technology and detailed knowledge of council weaknesses. More importantly, they brought credibility. If the Varian, who had successfully defied the council for 2 centuries, were willing to partner with humans, other species took notice. Within a year of the council incident, humanity had formalized agreements with 23 species. Some were powerful civilizations like the Korath. Others were small, isolated groups that had been ignored by the council. All of them shared a common thread they valued: independence and mutual respect over hierarchical authority. They called themselves the Independent Species Coalition, though the name was informal and no species claimed leadership over the others. Back on Earth, Prime Minister Yuna met with representatives from each partner species, not in a grand chamber designed to intimidate, but in a circular conference room where every seat was at the same height. We propose a governing charter, a Korath representative said. Structure prevents chaos. The council had structure, a Varian delegate countered. It enabled their corruption. Taman, now serving as humanity's chief coordinator for the coalition, mediated the discussion. What if we establish principles instead of structures? Guidelines that each species implements according to their own nature. The debate continued for weeks. Eventually, they agreed on 5 core principles. Equal representation regardless of species age or population. Decisions by consensus rather than voting. Mutual defense without mandatory military integration. Free trade without economic coercion. Open sharing of scientific knowledge. No species could be compelled to act. No hierarchy would be established. No ancient civilization could claim authority over younger ones. It was messy. It was inefficient. It was nothing like the council's clean, authoritative system, and it worked. Trade flourished. Scientific collaboration produced innovations at a pace that surprised everyone involved. Military cooperation remained loose but effective, based on mutual interest rather than obligation. Most importantly, species that had been isolated or marginalized for centuries finally had partners they could trust. The Galactic Council watched all of this with growing alarm. The economic reports grew worse each quarter. More species were considering withdrawal from the Council. The Varian Collective had nearly collapsed entirely. their client species openly rebelling, the Velcrum Archon made one final attempt. He broadcast a message across all channels. Directed at Earth and every coalition species, the Galactic Council offers humanity a permanent seat on the High Council with full veto authority over all Council decisions. We offer complete autonomy for human colonies and compensation for all losses incurred. We acknowledge our error and ask humanity to return. Broadcast reached Earth. It reached the coalition species. It spread across the galaxy. 3 days later, Prime Minister Yuna made a public response. She stood before cameras in Seoul, with representatives from 23 coalition species standing behind her. The Galactic Council has made an offer, she began. An offer of power and privilege. Of a seat at the table we were once denied.
Oh.
She paused, her expression thoughtful. The Council believes this conflict is about status, about respect, about humanity's wounded pride. Another pause. They are wrong. This was never about us wanting to join their hierarchy. It was about them teaching us that their hierarchy is fundamentally unjust. They have offered us a place among the oppressors. We choose instead to stand with those they have oppressed. Behind her, the coalition representatives stood silent and unified. We do not seek revenge against the Council. We simply have no interest in their system. We have built something better. Something based on equality rather than authority. On cooperation rather than coercion. On mutual respect rather than enforced hierarchy. Yuna looked directly into the camera. The Council's offer is rejected. We invite all species who value independence and dignity to join us instead. The broadcast ended. Across Council space, 3 more species immediately filed formal withdrawal notices. The coalition had 26 members by the end of the week. 5 years had passed since. Ambassador Day-Wan walked out of the Galactic Council chamber in silence. The galaxy had transformed in ways that even he had not fully anticipated. The Independent Species Coalition now included 41 member species. Some had left the Council formally. Others had never been part of it. A few had been created through first contact, missions led by Coalition explorers, who ventured into regions the Council had ignored the Coalition's. Economic output had surpassed the Council's. 2 years earlier, their trade network spanned territories that Council ships could not reach. Their scientific advances had made Council technology look increasingly outdated. Most significantly, the Coalition had proven that cooperation without hierarchy was not just possible, but superior. Day-One himself had retired from active diplomacy. He had done what he set out to do. Humanity had found its place, and it was not the place the Council had tried to assign them. He now lived on a colony world called New Haven, a high-gravity planet that the Council's surveys had dismissed as unsuitable for settlement. Humans thrived there. So did 3 other Coalition species that had adapted to the challenging environment. Children of different species played together in streets that overlooked mountains taller than any on Earth. Cities grew in harmony with the native ecosystem, using construction techniques that Korath engineers had shared. Day-One walked through the central marketplace, joined the mix of languages and cultures. A Korath merchant argued good-naturedly with a human customer over the price of crystalline artwork. Tolson researchers projected mathematical equations in the air, discussing theoretical physics with human scientists who had learned to read their language. Vereen technicians repaired a water system alongside human engineers. Combining their different approaches to create better solutions, this was what they had built. Not a replacement for the Council, but something entirely different. His communicator chimed. The message was marked urgent, forwarded from Earth's diplomatic service. Day-One almost ignored it. He was retired, after all. But old habits made him open it. The message was from the Velcrum Archon. Personal communication, not official. The security encryption was the highest level the Council used. Day-One read it in the privacy of his home. A modest structure built into the hillside with a view of the valley below. The Archon's words were carefully chosen. Stripped of the formal diplomatic language that usually characterized Council communications, the Council was dissolving. The announcement would be made in 1 month. After 10,000 years, the Galactic Council could no longer sustain itself. Too many species had withdrawn. Too much infrastructure had collapsed. The remaining members had lost faith in the institution. The Archon's message was not asking for help. It was not requesting intervention. It was simply informing Day One leader to another, that an era was ending. At the end of the message, the Archon had added a personal note. Was there any other way this could have ended? When you walked out of that chamber, did you know the council would fall? Or did you simply stop caring whether it survived? Day One sat for a long time, looking out at the alien sunset that painted New Haven's sky in shades of purple and gold. He thought about how to respond, about whether to respond at all. Finally, he began typing. When we walked out, I did not know what would happen. I only knew that we would not return. Whether the council survived was your choice, not ours. You could have changed. You could have reformed your systems, addressed the inequalities, treated all species with equal respect. Considering his next words carefully, but that would have required the powerful to give up their power voluntarily. It would have required the ancient species to admit that age does not grant wisdom or authority. You were never willing to do that. Day One stared at the message for several minutes. Then he deleted it entirely and wrote something simpler. Oh. There are always other ways. You simply refused to see them, sent the message, and closed the communicator. The next morning, Hannah visited. She now commanded the Coalition's Joint Defense Initiative, coordinating military cooperation among species that had very different approaches to security and warfare. Did you hear? She asked, settling into a chair on Day One's porch. The council is done, I heard, Day One confirmed. People are celebrating. There are parties in human space. Some Coalition species are practically throwing festivals. Day One nodded but said nothing. Hannah studied him. You are not celebrating. No, he said quietly. I am not sad either. I simply feel ... nothing. The council is not our concern anymore. It has not been for 5 years. Some species want us to help them, Hannah continued. The council members that are left, they are facing serious problems. Food shortages, infrastructure collapse, social unrest. They are asking if the Coalition would provide humanitarian assistance. And what do you think? Day One asked. Hannah was quiet for a moment. I think we should help. Not because they deserve it. Not because we forgive them. But because people are suffering, and we have the capacity to ease that suffering. Day One smiled slightly. You have grown into a good leader, Hannah. More compassionate than I expected from a soldier. You taught me that strength is not just about force, she replied. It is about choosing when to use force and when to extend a hand. The Coalition should make its own decision, Day One said. It is not my choice anymore. I am retired. The Coalition wants your input, Hannah insisted. Many species still look to you for guidance. Day One stood and walked to the edge of the porch, looking out at New Haven's growing cityscape. Then tell them this. If council species request to join the Coalition as equals, accepting our principles of mutual respect and shared governance, we should welcome them. If they request humanitarian aid without political conditions, we should provide it because that is who we are. He turned back to Hannah. But if they ask us to help rebuild their council, to restore their hierarchy, to return to the system that failed them, we should refuse. Not out of spite, but because helping them maintain a broken system is not kindness. It is cruelty. Hannah nodded slowly. I will convey that message. 6 months later, the Galactic Council held its final session. Only 19 species remained, less than half the original membership. The Velcrum Archon, now appearing far older than his years, made the announcement that surprised no one. After 10,000 years, the Galactic Council ceases to function. We have maintained order across the galaxy, fostered cooperation among species, and guided younger civilizations. But our time has ended. We failed to adapt to a changing galaxy. We valued tradition over justice, hierarchy over equality. The Archon paused, and for a moment something like sadness crossed his ancient features. We were given opportunities to change. We refused them all. That failure is ours alone. The council dissolved. Some species immediately applied to join the Coalition. Others retreated into isolation. A few tried to form their own organizations, smaller councils based on regional interests. The coalition evaluated each application carefully. Species that genuinely accepted the principles of equal partnership were welcomed. Those that tried to recreate council-style hierarchies were politely rejected. Former council species that had treated humans poorly during the dispute received no special punishment. They were evaluated by the same standards as everyone else. The coalition had no interest in revenge. They were building a future, not settling old scores. 3 former council species joined the coalition in the first year after the dissolution. 5 more in the second year. The Velcrum were among them, humbled but not broken, ready to contribute rather than command. Daewon watched all of this from New Haven. He received periodic updates from Hannah and Prime Minister Yuna, but he did not participate in the decisions. His part in this story had ended when he walked out of that chamber 5 years ago. One evening, Taemin visited. The chief science advisor had become one of the coalition's most important coordinators. Facilitating research collaboration across dozens of species, Talson made another breakthrough, Taemin said excitedly. Working with human and Korath researchers. A method of faster-than-light travel that does not stress space-time the way current methods do. We could explore regions that have been unreachable. Daewon smiled at his old friend's enthusiasm. You should be telling the Coalition Council, not a retired ambassador. I wanted you to hear it first, Taemin said. None of this would exist without what you did. Without that walkout. I did nothing, Daewon replied. I simply stopped participating in something unjust. That was not nothing, Taemin insisted. That was everything. You showed us that walking away from a broken system was not weakness, but strength. That we did not need their approval to build something better. Daewon was quiet for a moment. Do you ever wonder if there was another way? If we could have reformed the council from within, instead of abandoning it? Taemin considered the question seriously. Perhaps. But it would have taken centuries. It would have required us to accept their injustices, while slowly working for change. And there was no guarantee they would ever truly change. Instead, we built something new in 5 years, Daewon said softly. Yes, Taemin agreed. And it is better than what they had. Years continued to pass. The coalition grew to 63 member species. Former council territories reorganized into regional partnerships within the coalition framework. Trade flourished. Scientific advancement accelerated. Military conflicts became rare as species learned that cooperation brought more benefit than competition. The galaxy had not become a utopia. There were still disputes, still challenges, still species that chose isolation over cooperation. But the fundamental nature of interspecies relations had changed. Power no longer flowed from age or military strength. It came from mutual benefit and earned respect. Daewon grew old on New Haven. His hair turned gray, then white. His steps became slower. But he lived to see children who had never known the council grow up in a galaxy where species met as equals. On his final day, he sat on his porch watching the sunset one last time. Hannah, now retired herself, sat beside him. Taemin was there too, taking a rare break from his research coordination duties. Do you have any regrets? Hannah asked quietly. Daewon thought about the question. About the 40 million people evacuated from their homes. About the suffering that had occurred during the transition years. About the council species that had struggled when human support vanished. Many, he finally said, but walking out of that chamber is not one of them.